I felt a relief that I knew the weekend would be over and I wouldn't be like on, I wanted moments where I could just be quiet. I wanted moments where I could just be by myself. And I sat with that. Good morning, and welcome back to the Sage Sorority. I'm your host, Chantal. How are we all doing, guys? Happy Friday. I am so sorry for my absence yesterday. I had a whirlwind of a past 10 days without getting into too much detail. It was just super crazy. And my flight was delayed 3.5, almost 4 hours. So flight was originally scheduled for 6:30, didn't end up leaving until after 10, which was so crazy because there was a 10:15 flight. And I was like, so we're literally just leaving at the same time. And first it was delayed because of the weather. Then it was delayed because catering, I guess, put our food on another flight, which, guys, I have traveled a lot. I have been around the world. I have been probably on like 100 aircrafts at this point in my life. And I've never been delayed for that. I was like, wow, I didn't even know that was a thing. I was like, this is crazy. And it was starting to get crazy at the gate because this guy's like, you're not giving us answers. It can't be because of the weather. And I was like, oh my God, these people are going to lose it. And then obviously, it's so late. So it's getting dark. People are getting agitated. They're tired. It was a mess. And this month is so busy for me. So I was in DC for about 10 days. If you follow me on Instagram, you would have seen that. A huge reason why I went is because my niece graduated kindergarten, and graduating kindergarten is not really a thing in Canada. We don't have that. You go from kindergarten all the way up to grade 5, and then you have a graduation. But apparently it's a thing in the US, and it was so adorable. And the graduation ended up getting pushed by a day. So I pushed my flight by a day, which then cascaded. And, you have that domino effect when you get back. So that is my absence. You guys know I'm always going to be super honest with you. And this month is so crazy for me because now I'm back. I have about a week of a reprieve and work and hustling and networking before I go to Cannes Lions, which I mentioned is the Marketing Advertising Creator Conference in the south of France. And I'll be in the south of France for a week. Then I come back and it's the end of the month. And yeah, we're basically full-fledged in summer mode. So this month, half the month I'm in London, half the month I'm abroad. So it's definitely a busy month. And before we even get into the real intro, let me do a quick introduction if you're new here. Welcome to the Sage Sorority if you are new, and welcome back to our loyal listeners. The Sage Sorority is a podcast for women who are doing the thinking, the living, and the work all at once. We cover friendship, identity, self-concept, ambition, dating, and modern womanhood. Your only dues here are your ears, never your dignity. So if you are new, welcome. If you've been here, you already know the vibe. Please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on YouTube so you never miss an episode. And if you are a YouTube girly, make sure you hit that notification bell so you are always notified when we drop new episodes. They're usually on Thursdays, but sometimes my schedule gets away from me and they will be on Fridays like today. Okay, so as you can tell by today's title, I solo parented my niece and my nephew for the weekend. So we are talking full on morning, breakfast, school run, school pickup on Friday, all the way through to Sunday evening. Okay. And this was a lot for me, and we're going to get into it. For context, I have a niece who is 5 and I have a nephew who is almost 3. And I want to talk about it on the pod, and not really as a confessional or a hot take on motherhood, because I don't really have those. Just more of an honest account of what those 3 days told me about myself, and about a conversation that maybe a lot of women are having with themselves and not saying out loud, because I do think that it can be hard for women to explore motherhood without actually fully doing it, because there's always a separation, right? But I mean, if you can take those moments and do them wholeheartedly and then evaluate how you felt and what it was to you, I think that's really helpful. And then it can be tough because you're either speaking to a mother or you're speaking to someone who's not a mother. And our experiences, I'm going to say cloud our judgment and our advice and stuff, but cloud just sounds negatively, but it's we come from our experiences, right? So it's kind of hard to play both sides of the fence, because Motherhood, I don't know if I've ever said on the pod, but I say in my personal life, I really do think it is such a profound experience. And I think it's the most profound experience a woman can have on this earth. And there's really nothing that can compare to it. And I don't think there's anything that you can really do to prepare for it. So given that it's such high stakes and it's so transformational, it can be hard because the person you were before doesn't exist anymore. I know I'm kind of talking all over the place, but I hope that that kind of lays the foundation for how I feel about it. But then also, if you are a woman and you are looking to kind of explore what you want for yourself, you can never really get the full answer and you can never really get the full show because it's really something that you can't dip your toe into. And it's something that is so different yet unifying for so many different women. So anyways, like I said, my niece is 5, my nephew's almost 3, and I love them. They are truly like my favorite people on earth. They are so painfully cute. I love seeing them. They really do like brighten my life and my day. They feel like missing puzzle pieces to our family. Like they are just a delight. And part of the reason why I love going to DC is also to spend time with them. You know, I grew up with my aunts, 2 of them specifically, in my day-to-day life, and I love that. And part of who I am is because of those relationships. And I can only hope to have that kind of effect on them. I love that they're in the US and I'm in Europe and I can shed light on different experiences and thought processes and show them like different parts of the world. And I love how dynamic our relationship is and how I hope it will continue to be. So I had them, like I said, for the weekend. So I planned activities. I was like, okay, I want to make sure that I'm getting them out of the house every day. You know, like let's have fun together. I don't want them to be cooped up in the house. I also don't want to be cooped up in the house. The weather in DC was absolutely perfect. It was like 29, 30, 31 degrees pretty much every day. Like for me, a Londoner who lives in perpetual gray, that is life. Like we need to be outside and we need to be enjoying this sun. So we're taking them to the farmers markets. I'm taking them to the children's museum, just out of the house because I believe that you can't just plop children in front of a TV and that's it for the weekend. I don't want to do that. I'm sure they would be fine with it, but I didn't want to do that. I cooked dinner. I made a delightful roast chicken on Sunday. I showed up by every measure, and I think I was a great stand-in, and I did it well. I care about them. Good baths, you know, rubbing them down to sleep, giving them snacks, listening to them, playing with them, all of the things, right? Filling in the role as best as possible to my ability. Obviously, they're not my children. This is not my house, etc., etc. And I came away from it more certain than I've ever been that I feel conflicted on that type of life. And not because anything went really wrong. It actually went completely fine. But because I am so in tune with how I feel, and I can almost like coach myself and check myself in real time. And I was really paying attention to how I felt throughout the weekend. And I need to say that carefully because the social script around this is very, very strict and rigid. And I'm telling you guys now, like, there's a lot of nuance here. And if that goes over your head, then listen to this episode more than once. But there's a lot of gray in life, and the black and white with this stuff, it doesn't fly, it doesn't work, and that's not who I am. Because people are like, you spend a weekend with young children that you love. And I had my friends asking me like, oh, does it make you feel broody? And it's like, no, I actually felt the opposite. Like, did it make you feel like you wanted children? And I was like, no, it actually didn't feel like that at all. Like I felt a relief that I knew the weekend would be over and I wouldn't be like on, you know, I wanted moments where I could just be quiet. I wanted moments where I could just be by myself. And I sat with that. And it's also because spending the weekend with them is so far out of my comfort zone in the sense of what my normal life is like. I can do children. I can do young kids. I can do education stuff. I can handle the food. I can change the diapers. I understand children. I understand the nuance with children. I come from a big family. I'm one of 5. I'm number 2 out of that group. And then I also grew up with my younger cousins that are anywhere from 10 to 12 years younger than me. So I have experience with babies and toddlers and young children and all of that stuff. I'm truly not a fish out of water when it comes to that. If you hand me a kid, I can get down with the kid. I can instantly bond. I can instantly connect. I can be nurturing. I don't have like a hesitation or a block when it comes to that. But it's very different from my regular life. I live alone. I travel when I want. I go for long walks if I need to clear my head. I can journal at my kitchen table in absolute silence. I can have a slow morning. I can sleep quietly and peacefully without having any interruption. Like all of these things that single people, I'm sure, sometimes take for granted because you don't know what you don't know. And this is your current state. And the problem is, or the issue is that my current life to a life with two young children, like two under five, essentially, 72 hours nonstop, it's just a very strong contrast to what I normally do. And I think what was really difficult for me is that there's no off switch when you're single parenting. Whether you are single by choice or you are single by circumstance, or you are married with an active partner, but that partner is away for work, they travel a lot, there's caretaking, whatever it is, where for whatever reason you are either taking care of your child or children for long stretches by yourself or often short stretches, whatever it is, there's no off switch when you're with those kids by yourself. You can go to bed feeling exhausted and then that's it for the day. But then it's Saturday and kids don't want to sleep in, right? So they're waking you up at 7, 7:30, 8 a.m., whatever it is. Or your 5-year-old crawls into bed with you in the middle of the night because they want to sleep. And it's like, that's totally going to mess up my sleep. You know, as you get older, and I know all the women in their 30s, if it hasn't hit you yet, it is coming. Our sleep is so important for us. It's so important for us. And I feel like I have to be so careful now about getting good sleep and monitoring when I'm getting bad sleep so that it's not piling on top of each other. And you can't get good sleep when someone's coming in beside you and sleeping in the bed. And you know, kids sleep crazy, right? Like there's an arm in your face, there's a leg on your stomach, like just absolutely crazy. So are you getting good sleep? Probably not. And that's your day. And then you're back at it. There's no transition. There's no negotiation. There's no, I'm going to leave you guys here while I go outside and get some peace of mind. You are just on for the whole day until they sleep and then you're on again. And so much of my time is mine. So that contrast was really jarring and I never really thought about it until I was doing it. I can think about it in a logical sense if I were to have a kid, but for those 3 days, I don't think I would have thought that that would have meant a lot to me not having it. And it really did. It was very jarring, to be honest. And it's not that I needed heaps and heaps of time away from them, but it was more just like, even if I wanted like 10 minutes, I couldn't get it. And the thing is that with children, there's so many variables, right? Someone could be listening to this and be like, oh, wait till you have 3. Or what if you have a special needs kid? Or all kids are different and you might get chill ones that are a lot more kind of low key. Or, you know, my mom was like, it's different when it's your own. And just all these things that can be kind of comforting, but then also not because it's such a variable. It's such a grab bag of an experience, right? And I know to all the mothers out there, it's also a grab bag of an experience day to day, year to year. And obviously there's a version of this conversation that's also about personality. Like someone could be listening to me and say, oh, well, she's just not a kid person. She needs her space. And whether or not I'm a kid person, I don't really know. But am I someone who needs my space? Absolutely. That I'm very sure on. But I also think that that kind of framing lets us off the hook for the bigger truth, which is that early childhood parenting is extremely relentless. And I need that message to be sent far and wide. And I think it is so relentless in a way that on the outside can be very hard to understand. And I would classify like early childhood parenting from like 0 to like 8 years old. That's a long fucking time of your life. 8 years is a long time. It's a lot. And it's even a lot on a really good day. And I'm not saying that to scare anyone or to put anyone down or to dissuade myself or to persuade myself. I'm just kind of throwing all the information out there because I don't think we talk about it enough. especially with women not having children. It's always just kind of this, are you going to have kids? Are you not going to have kids? And it's like, there's so much more to talk about, I feel like. And yes, granted, 10, 20, 30, 50 years ago, there wasn't. It was you do, you don't. And depending on how far we go back, it's just you do or you can't. That's it. And I'm grateful that there's a lot more nuance to these conversations now. I really am. And I want to talk about an example that I gave to a friend of a friend that ended up looping back to me. And it was like, I said to her, and I remember this very vividly because we were at dinner, those hot summer nights where you're just laughing, the sushi is hitting, the service is great, the wine is cold, and you're having laughter and heated discussions. It was just a great night. And I said, maybe you're unsure about motherhood because you've never seen an example up close of the kind of mother you'd actually want to be. And it really hit her. And she was like, that was good. And I need to think about that. And I think a part of me maybe feels the same way. And I don't mean that, again, because nuance is so important, I don't mean that I've seen bad mothers. Quite the contrary. Actually, I've seen amazing mothers, loving mothers, mothers who sacrifice, families that are united, kids that love their parents, parents that love their kids. I've only seen that up close, to be honest. But it's more about the other stuff, the day-to-day, the woman, not just the mother. Like I said, I grew up in a big family. I'm the eldest girl. I've been around children my whole life. Okay. And I've been around girl children my whole life. One thing I will say with my nephew, which is so funny, is like sometimes you just like look at him and you're just like, where did you come from? Because this is such a family of chicks. Sorry, I know that's a terrible word. This is such a family of like girls and women. And I just look at him because he's so crazy. And I'm like, are you crazy because you're crazy or are you crazy because you're a boy? So confusing. I know gender is a social construct, but just roll with me. But it's also just so fascinating because it's such a learning experience. Because the amount of times that I have to tell him to like not jump and not climb is insane. And if you have a son, I know you're probably laughing because you're like, yeah, that's just what they're about. But it's new for me because, again, we just have a lot of girl children in my family. But mothers are stretched, mothers that I've seen are tired. They're overwhelmed. And I don't know a lot of mothers who are rested and have a lot of time to themselves and have able to maintain a sense of self and identity, who are not running on fumes or guilt or just like the sheer force of love alone. And the reason why I say that is because I saw that clearly this past weekend in myself. I see what that constant onness, that constant overwhelm could do to someone over time. How it gets like in your body and your patience and your wording becomes thin and you're heightened and you're snapping more than you would normally. And I can see that, it's like when people say, oh, my mom's a nag. It's like, is your mom a nag because that's her personality? Or is she a nag because she's a fucking mother and that's what motherhood does to you? Like, these are literally the questions I'm like looking up to the sky and thinking about while I'm at a children's museum with a bunch of other parents wrangling young children. When I tell you that I'm truly an existential person, like online or offline, this is literally me. It really is. So I'm looking at that. I'm evaluating myself in real time. And I'm like, I don't want that. Like, I don't want that identity. I don't want to be that woman. And I don't mean that in an arrogant way. I just mean that in a self-critical way. I know what stress can do to me and I know what stress can do to my body and I know my tolerance. But then when you're forced into very compromising situations and then it's daily, it's every minute, it's hourly, it's whatever, it's your new life. There is no separation because there's no going back. I worry about what that can do to me. And I know that the version of me that is always depleted is not a version that like I want to live in. And obviously I've seen happy mothers, right? And I think the dichotomy sometimes is that sometimes they're one and the same. The woman who is snapping and seems tense and seems always frustrated or doesn't have enough time to herself is also the woman who genuinely wanted this, wants those kids, maybe has the right support, maybe hasn't lost herself in it, Like, I know that that also exists. It's just not the majority of what I feel like I'm getting privy to. And I can be very left brain. I can be very pattern driven and logical driven. And that comes with its own benefits and curses, right? And our brain loves seamlessness and things that make sense, quote unquote. And I'm like, maybe this is an experience that just doesn't make sense. Like maybe motherhood is not a make sense experience. Maybe that's what it is. And because we're so taught and conditioned and socialized that it is innate, it is biological, it is for you. You will not have a complete life if you don't do this. That we're like, hey, maybe we reframe it and it's like, this is really hard and it actually isn't going to make sense ever. Yet for some, it is still worth that upheaval. And I think leaving it with more questions, I know for some people wouldn't be very helpful, but I do think it'd be very honest. I hope I'm making sense. And part of my, self-interrogation in real time when I was having this and I was talking to ChatGPT, my little therapist in the moment, what it spat out to me I thought was really interesting was, it was like, you're someone who really values your autonomy. And what you're realizing is that when you don't have that or as much of it, how quickly your patience kind of deteriorates. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. I remember talking to you guys about the core values, and one of my core values is autonomy and freedom. I kind of link them to the same. I love being able to make choices for myself. I love to be able to decide what I want to do. It's part of the reason why I love being freelance. Anything that I can do for myself in that way where I can make the decision for myself, I love it. I revel in it. I love having a sense of self and autonomy over myself. Like, I can't express that enough. I see when people are like, oh, I miss being a kid, and I don't. I have so much empathy for my child self and I look back with fondness, but I don't miss being a child at all. I actually, as a child, felt like I didn't have enough say and I wanted say and I didn't have it. And I don't know if most kids feel like that, but I definitely felt like that. I remember, because I have an older brother, I remember seeing how much autonomy and freedom he had. One, because he was older, two, because he was a boy. And I remember wanting that for myself and being very frustrated that I didn't have it. So when I see people like miss childhood, I'm like, oh, no, no, no. I love being an adult. Yes, it's tough. And there's all these things you need to think about. And the to-do list is ever growing. And there is such a beauty and innocence to childhood. But I guess I just focus on the positives of the freedom that I have. And I know that that's not really what this episode is about, but I'm just kind of tying it all together. So I hope you're still with me. Another thing that ChatGPT said to me was that you feel these things, but you don't act on it. Like when I'm feeling frustrated or annoyed, but I know that I'm not going to say anything crazy to them because they're kids and they're innocent and they're just doing what is truly innate to them. They are not trying to hurt me or frustrate me or do anything negative to me. They are just purely self-serving. That's a lot of lessons for us in the grand scheme of adulthood, but they're just purely self-serving, right? It has nothing to do with me. It is truly them fulfilling their own needs. And because they don't have any frontal lobe, they're just impulsive. So whatever idea that they think is a grand idea or thought or whatever, they're just acting on it. That's it. And they're just literally acting their age. Like they're truly just being themselves. And what a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old find to be normal for them and fair, asking the same question a million times or whatever, adults find exhausting, right? And that it's just the way it is. Nothing about it is personal. And I think that's not anything I needed to learn, but it is something that I was really good at just compartmentalizing, even though I feel some type of way because I'm still human. And again, this is a very sharp contrast to how I normally do things, to put it in better terms, like I don't have these kind of reps, I don't have this skin built up of taking care of young children in this kind of way. I think that also ChatGPT was like, this reinforced how much you value freedom and autonomy and stimulation and the ability to direct your own time, and that it's useful information, but I also don't have to make it more than that. Because I was like, is my non-joy, like, if I'm not bouncing off the walls, does that mean that I don't want to have children? Like, that's kind of how I was like, oh, I actually don't find this to be like so amazing and fun. So maybe that means something. And it was like, no, it just means it's just information. It's not necessarily like rigid information that you need to kind of act on in that sense, which I thought was very interesting because there are no guarantees. And I also don't know what that experience would look like for me. I can only see what it looks like for others. I don't know what it would look like for me. It could look different in a positive way. It could look different in a negative way, right? I believe that motherhood is a choice, and sometimes child-free is also a choice. And I truly don't believe either choice is better than the other. I really, really don't. I think that they have different trade-offs. And what I realized about myself this past weekend was that the trade-offs matter versus for some people, the trade-offs don't matter. And I think for me, the trade-offs matter. And I was experiencing it in real time. And it was like, okay, like, how do I feel? And how do I really feel? One time I was in therapy years ago, and my therapist was like, and how do you feel about it? And I just said what I thought. And she was like, no, how do you feel? And that was a huge light bulb moment for me because the idea of that mind body connection to me was very fragmented. And not because anything traumatic had happened to me in my childhood, it's just not how I thought. So when she was like redirecting, like, no, how do you feel about it? Feel emotions, not like your thoughts. It was very profound for me in that moment. And I think that the trade-offs are real, but I have no problem being hypercritical with myself about how I felt in that moment. You know, my frustration, my stress, you know, like feeling like I'm always on. And it's also relentless. There's no one after all that strenuous like weekend or whatever, or week or month or whatever, there's no one patting you on the back and telling you like you did a good job. And that can be very hard. And a hairstylist I used to go to, she told me that. She said, one of the hardest things about being a mother, because she is a single mother who co-parents, but it's mostly on her, as it is a lot of the time. She said, there's no one turning around and telling you that you're doing a good job with your kid, you know? If you're doing a bad job because the kid is messing up, yeah, lots of people have things to say. But if you're doing a good job, no one turns around and says, wow, you're doing such a great job with her or him or them. And for her, she was saying that the report card was one of the only affirmations that she really got that she was doing a good job. And that's why she took it so seriously and took education so seriously, because it was one of the only markers she really had that like, hey, everything she's pouring into this kid is kind of working out. And I also thought that was very profound and honest. And I say all that to say that part of the conversation that I really think gets skipped over is that most women don't plan to parent alone, you know? Like, that's not most women's intentions. You either get married or you're with a partner and life happens. And there's a million reasons why those things can happen. Separations happen, partners who travel constantly happen, men who are technically present but functionally absent also happen. And suddenly you're just doing the majority of it or far more of it by yourself than you plan to. And it's deeply hard when it's young children. I think it's harder at different stages as well. It's just a different type of hard, right? But with young children, it's just very relentless, right? Because they are relentless in their needs, in their desires, in their emotions. It's very 10 out of 10 out of 10 most of the time. And I thought about that a lot this weekend because what I was doing, caring for two kids alone, you know, in someone else's home, managing the logistics and the emotions and the timetable of everything and the energy of it, that is the reality for a lot of people. Like, I was trying it on for a weekend, and this is a lot of women's lives. And I don't say that, you know, don't take that as like, well, duh, girl. Like, because I'm not saying it lightly. I'm saying it with like so much reverence and like severity to it, because again, you can't really try it on unless you do it, you know? And this was as close as I can really get. And it was a lot. And it's like, we know it's a lot when you see it, but then when you're doing it yourself, you're like, holy shit. and I'm just supposed to do this day in, day out, and still like have a life and still have a job and still all these other things, you know? This is someone's real life. It's not a temporary arrangement. The weight of that, even as someone who loves those kids, I would take those kids if I had to in a heartbeat, was very, very, very real. And I say this very plainly. If I were ever to become a mother, I genuinely, genuinely need to do it with someone who's wildly supportive and wildly involved. And I know, everyone's like, duh, that's what we all want. That's what we all thought we had, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not saying that you're not saying that or have said that or want that. I'm not speaking about anyone or anything. I am truly speaking about myself. That is the ultimate goal. That is the only way that I think I would want to do it. And I say that because I've also met women who would happily do it on their own. And that I know for me is a no. I just don't think I would want to go through that by myself. I mean, if you get thrown into that situation, that's different because anything can happen. It's not just having a shitty partner. Your partner could die, knock on wood, you know? So there's lots of things. And this is not like a blame game episode. It's just more about if I was doing this in the most pleasant way that I can think of, because I know myself so well, this is what I would choose. That's how I'm framing this. And I hope you guys are getting what I'm putting down. If you're not, DM me on Instagram. Yeah, I just need real help because I think I would lose my fucking mind, to be honest. And I think I would just lose a lot of myself, and I feel like I would be on autopilot a lot. And my joie de vivre and my ability to, you know, when I'm going for a walk, just stop and stare at a tree and be present because I'm grateful for my life and I'm grateful for this moment. I feel like I would be so pulled out of my head all the time in a negative way that I would lose a lot of that because you're just so focused on the 1, 2, 3, 4, however many kids you have in front of you. Because what? Kids are relentless. They're demanding. And that's their right. That's their right. That's what they deserve. That's what their brains need. That's what their bodies need. That's what their soul needs. So I don't say that in a negative way because I also am someone who is very fair and very just, and being good to children and being an active parent and giving them your best as you have it and setting them up for the ultimate success in this very insane world is the right thing to do. And I would do that, but at what cost? To myself. And that is what I was grappling with on the weekend. And finally, I just want to add that my personal experience isn't being blown out of proportion because the University of New Hampshire had a study and it was published last September in 2025, because they found that in 2024, there were 5.7 million more childless women of prime childbearing age in the US than prior trends would have even predicted. So they were predicting the trends and they had to add 5.7 more million women on top of that than what they predicted. And that's up 2.1 million from 2016. I'll link it in the show notes so you guys can see. But the point is that women are reckoning with this question everywhere. It's not a niche. It is not a niche that a woman is trying to figure out if motherhood is for her. And then there's also the regret piece, right? I've heard from elders more than once, more than thrice, because someone brings it up, especially when you're in your 30s, this gets brought up a lot. You'll regret it. Michigan State University research found no evidence that older child-free adults experience more life regret than older parents. In fact, older parents were slightly more likely to want to change something about their lives. So that is some interesting food for thought, because a huge conversation is that the kid part is difficult, but when you're older, who's going to take care of you? You want to have adult children, et cetera, et cetera. And I will link that also in the show notes for you. And again, I'm not using that to make a case for either side, to make a case for you, to make a case for me. I'm purely just sharing the data. And I'm using it to say that the threat of regret is not a good enough reason to make a life decision. I don't think so. I would rather meet someone and they're like, I'm 49% no kids and I'm 51% kids. And I would be like, I think you should rock on with that 51%. That's what I would say to someone who told me that. But do this because you might regret it. I just think that's a really, 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 really expensive thing to do. And I don't mean expensive in terms of currency and money. Like, that's a tall order for a chance of regret. Very tall. And I don't think any mother would argue with me on that. And a very long, long, long road. And a very expensive road. And a road that you should know you will likely work longer in your life. Unless you are able to 10, 20, 30x your income, you will likely work longer. There's a lot of things. And again, it's not about convincing. It's just about, I want women to know what they're getting into, because I've mentioned this before, maybe on my earlier pods, that, we are sold the fairy tale in a lot of things, and motherhood is definitely a part of that. It is not pretty bows and Instagram pictures and Halloween costumes where we're all dressed up as the Addams family. It is so much more than that. And I just want people to know, men too, but I'm not talking to them, I'm talking to y'all. So anyways, to sum this up, I don't think any life is better or worse. I was more than proud of myself for the way I handled the weekend. I loved spending time with my niece and nephew. They're so darn cute. I loved doing stuff with them and getting them out of the house. Also, because we are women and this is a safe space, I also got my period on the Saturday, and I really think that just made the Saturday that much more difficult, because the cramps were kicking my ass, and I was like, yeah, this is just not it. It's 35 degrees outside, my cramps are kicking my ass, I've got 2 young children, I'm in a city that I don't know, I'm just trying to figure it out, I'm just trying to keep it together. But of course, what did I do? I got dressed, I showed up, I did my hair, I did my makeup, because listen, I might feel like shit, but I refuse to look like shit. And you just got on with it, because one thing women are going to do is just get on with it. So trust me, I'm aware of all the pieces that were at play. But like I said, I don't think either life is better. I think they're very different. I think people frame it as better or worse because it's an easy thing to do, but I really just think they're different. And the right answer depends entirely on who you are, what you want, and most importantly, what you are willing to sacrifice and move through to have it. Because trust me, there are major, major, major sacrifices on either side. Major. And what I do think is that a lot of the decisions gets made poorly when it comes from a place of fear, when it comes from a place of social pressure, or the idea that you're supposed to want this. I know women with children to fill the gap, and I know women with children because it seemed like the next logical step, and they didn't stop long enough to ask themselves if this is what they actually want, or do enough due diligence and research. There's nothing wrong with researching this to figure it out for themselves. And I'm not judging, because I understand. I understand the complexity. I understand the cultural, biological, familial, marketing, and societal conditioning, because it is fucking everywhere. To opt out of that is its own kind of autonomy, and dare I say, social defiance. What I'm trying to do, and what this weekend helped me do, see, kids are always teaching you, if you're open to the lesson, is to just be honest with myself. The fact that I was triggered was fascinating for me, because again, I live in my own bubble. So it's nice to see what my edges are. It's nice to see, is the work working? When all is good and you're with your friends, or you're in your little zone, or you're in your curated life, and I don't mean that in a stupid Instagram way. I mean that in a real way. All is well. But when you're thrown out of that with the real emotional elements around you, how do you handle it? Is the podcasts, like the Sage Sorority, the books, the magazine articles, the Substack, the therapy, is the work working? You can only know that when your feathers are ruffled, in that sense. You only know if the work is working. You only know if you studied the chapters on test day. And life is the test. Me having 2 children for a weekend is the test. And I found it fascinating. When I was inside that life, and 3 days is very brief in the grand scheme of things, what was my body telling me? Not necessarily what I thought I should feel, but what did I actually feel? And that was super useful and interesting to me. I'm in my 30s, I've built a life for myself, I'm ambitious in a way that takes up real space and time in my life. It really does. You know, it's a lot. It's a lot. It's 11 o'clock at night and I'm at my kitchen table and I'm working on a podcast that I have done every week for over a year. When I say it takes up real time and space, I mean that. And I value my autonomy in a way that is not incidental. It is load bearing. And I think that that's okay. And I think knowing that about yourself clearly, cleanly, and without apology is the goal, whatever the knowing about yourself is. Because the knowing about yourself might be like, I want to be a mother, and that's it. And I think that spending that intimate time with my niece and nephew illuminated some things for me, sharpened some things for me, and also brought up more questions. And I'm okay with that. It was good. It was a really good opportunity for me in a million more ways than just spending time with them. So that's it. That's the episode. There's no clean cut answer. I'm leaving you with probably even more questions and comments and thoughts than when the episode began, but that is the point because I don't think it's a simple question all the time. Well, for some it is, and I'm not going to take that away from you, but I think that I like to have nuanced conversations because life is very complex. And we do boil things down and whittle things down and classify things because our brain likes it. And we love things to be sharp and organized and, tucked away in a little box. We all do it. And I definitely am part of that as well. But I don't have that this week for you guys because I don't have it this week for myself. I'm okay with that. And I hope you are too. And I hope that this illuminated something in you, whether you are a mother or not, or somewhere in between. I hope that I gave you something to think about and something to consider. Obviously, this is not like our typical usual episode, but I felt like it was so important to talk about. And, like I said, I'm not really a come on the internet and bare my soul type of person, but the pod is our space, is our group chat, is the community for us to be honest and raw about the things that are coming up in our lives. And I want to be honest and raw with you guys because this might be a situation that you've experienced or you might not ever. But this is how we're able to be closer to each other, do more for one another, and grow our empathy is that you learn and hear about experiences that are maybe not your own. And we can kind of just illuminate different situations in a better way for each other that we can then share space. That maybe this isn't about you or your experience, but if you're hearing something similar in someone else, you can be that shoulder or create that safe space for them because you understand. So I hope that makes sense. I know that this was super wordy. I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. You know what to do. DM me on Instagram if you're listening on Spotify. Leave a comment. Make sure you're following us on all platforms at Chantal Russo to keep up with me personally or at the Sage Sorority to keep up with the show. I will link both studies from Michigan State and the University of New Hampshire in the show notes so you guys can see a little bit more. If this one landed for you, share it with someone who needs it, who's maybe in the middle of her motherhood era or still deciding. Subscribe, obviously, if you haven't already. This is how we grow the show. You guys know it matters more. It matters so, so much, and I appreciate it so, so much. I will talk to you guys same time next week. Have an amazing weekend. Bye.